What if I told you that one of the world's most iconic billion-dollar empires didn't come from Wall Street, Silicon Valley, or even the hands of a polished executive, but from a poor dropout boy in Buffalo, New York? You won't believe this. The shocking truth is that Spam, the canned meat mocked as cheap and mystery meat, was actually born from desperation, scraps, and a vision no one saw coming. Most people think you need investors, Ivy League degrees, or the perfect timing to change your life. But the truth revealed is uncomfortable. What really happened with Spam proves that survival, resilience, and raw grit can be more powerful than prestige. This isn't the fairytale version of success. This is the raw, unfiltered reality of what no one tells you. And here's the secret behind it. George Hormel didn't just create a product, he created a revolution. A poor boy turned factory worker turned billionaire. His story holds a hidden lesson that could change the way you look at rejection forever. Because rejection, when handled right, becomes reinvention, and reinvention, that's how empires are built. So lean in, because if a can of scraps could become a billion-dollar empire, imagine what you could do with the things the world has already overlooked in you. The poor boy in Buffalo, George Hormel, was born in Buffalo, New York, to immigrant parents who carried nothing but hope in their pockets. Life didn't hand him privilege, luxury, or even stability. It handed him struggle. You won't believe this, but his earliest memories weren't of toys or school books. They were of the factory smoke that hung heavy over the city. Poverty wasn't just a condition for him. It was the air he breathed, the walls he slept between, and the silence at his family's table when there wasn't enough food. From the start, life was an uphill climb. As a child, George didn't know the sound of applause or encouragement. What he knew was the sound of hard boots stomping on factory floors, and the constant reminder that he had to earn his place in the world. No one saw it coming, but while most kids were learning math in school, George was learning survival on the streets. His parents worked tirelessly, but opportunity was scarce, and education was a privilege reserved for the wealthy. George would soon discover that fate wasn't going to give him a handout. He had to carve his own way. By the age of 12, George had already made the unthinkable decision. He dropped out of school. Imagine being that young and already knowing your childhood was over. While his classmates chased dreams of becoming teachers or doctors, George walked into slaughterhouses and factories, his tiny hands doing the work of grown men. The truth revealed here is brutal. His education came not from books, but from the blood, sweat, and noise of industrial America. It almost didn't work, because most kids in his shoes broke under the weight. But George? He endured day after day. He faced the harsh smell of animal carcasses, the endless grind of machinery, and the unforgiving pace of work that never slowed down. And yet, he wasn't just working. He was watching while others complained or turned. Numb to the pain, George noticed things others ignored: patterns, waste, inefficiencies. The hidden lesson was clear. Sometimes the smallest details can hold the biggest secrets. And those secrets, they would one day turn into billion-dollar opportunities. But here's the shocking story: George often felt invisible. No one cared about the poor boy cleaning scraps in the corner. No one believed someone like him could matter. And yet, he was quietly sharpening his instincts, observing the very system that overlooked him. He began asking questions others didn't dare to ask. Why was so much meat discarded? Why did the wealthy eat well while working families starved? What no one tells you is that invisibility can be a gift. It allows you to see without being seen. And here's the cliffhanger: no one saw it coming, but this boy, this dropout from Buffalo, would soon challenge the very industry that ignored him. He wasn't ready yet, but the seeds of rebellion were already planted. What really happened next would change everything. Because the factory floors were about to become his classroom. Factory floors and harsh lessons. Factory floors were unforgiving, loud machines clanging, the smell of raw meat lingering in the air, and the constant shouts of foremen pushing everyone faster. George Hormel, barely a teenager, was thrown into this world headfirst. You won't believe this, But his hands, still small and fragile, were already callous from hours of cutting, cleaning, and hauling. This wasn't just work, it was survival. Every mistake could cost him his job, or worse, his fingers. And yet, he endured, quietly learning day after day. George noticed something everyone else ignored: waste. Perfectly edible pieces of pork were tossed aside like garbage. While others shrugged and called it scrap, George couldn't stop, thinking, what if rejection could become opportunity? The truth revealed here is uncomfortable. Most people walk past opportunities because they're disguised as problems. George, however, saw the problem as a secret behind something bigger. First, he kept his observations to himself. He was just a poor boy with no voice in a ruthless industry. But the thought haunted him: why throw away so much when families struggled to put food on the table? Learn from this mistake that so many make, overlooking the small things because they seem insignificant. George began to understand that innovation often comes from places no one respects. The shocking story? Billion-dollar ideas sometimes hide in the trash. Still, the factory life was brutal. The hours stretched endlessly, and exhaustion gnawed at him. It almost didn't work. Many nights he collapsed, ready to give up. But each failure, each misstep, only sharpened his resilience. Think about it. How many times have you seen something useless and dismissed it? George's hidden lesson here was profound. Sometimes the things people reject most fiercely are the very things with the power to change everything. There were moments when George questioned himself. Could he ever rise above this grinding cycle? He was surrounded by men who had given up on dreams long ago, trapped in the endless churn of labor. And yet, he refused to let the factory floor define him. He knew deep inside this wasn't the end, just the beginning. But then something shifted. His quiet observations began to crystallize into a vision. And that vision? It could rewrite the rules of food itself. Here's the cliffhanger. No one saw it coming, but the scraps he handled daily, the very pieces everyone laughed at, would soon become the foundation of a food empire. The factory wasn't breaking him, it was shaping him. What really happened next? George would take this hidden lesson and begin imagining the impossible, transforming waste into survival. A vision of transformation. George Hormel carried those images of waste with him like a shadow. While others clocked out of the factory and forgot about the scraps, he couldn't shake the thought. You won't believe this. Instead of dreaming about riches or escape, he dreamed about creating food that working families could actually afford. Families like his. The truth revealed is simple but powerful. The seed of innovation often begins with empathy. He wasn't chasing prestige. He was chasing survival for people like him. Late at night, George would picture it. Affordable meals that could last longer than a day. Something strong enough to withstand hardship, yet simple enough for anyone to use. The hidden lesson here: big ideas don't always start in boardrooms. Sometimes they start in the tired imagination of a factory boy staring at scraps. It almost didn't work because in those days, food preservation was primitive, unreliable, and mocked by many. But George was stubborn, and that stubbornness was his gift. He began experimenting with preservation methods, testing ways to make meat last longer without losing its flavor. Imagine a poor boy with no degree, no investors, and no connections, daring to think he could reinvent food itself. No one saw it coming, but every failure became a lesson. Each spoiled batch, each rejection from skeptics, sharpened his resolve. Learn from this mistake. Don't quit when the first dozen attempts crumble. Innovation is a game of endurance. At one point, George almost gave up. The costs were piling, the failures multiplying. It could have ended here, and history would have forgotten him. It's just another poor boy with impossible dreams. But here's the shocking story. He didn't stop. He pressed forward, believing that even from rejection, something valuable could emerge. That mindset, it changed everything. Because when you refuse to quit, even the scraps of your failures can become the foundation of your success. George's vision wasn't just about business. It was about dignity. What no one tells you is that food is more than sustenance, it's identity, security, hope. His dream wasn't to feed the rich, but to empower the poor, to give them a sense that tomorrow might be easier than today. This wasn't charity, it was reinvention. And with every failed experiment, George was inching closer to the one breakthrough that would shock the world. And here's the cliffhanger. He didn't know it yet, but his relentless testing would soon lead to the birth of something iconic, something mocked at first, but destined to become legendary. What really happened next? A poor boy's obsession with scraps was about to reshape the global food industry, and it all started with one strange name, Spam. But here's something you won't believe. While we uncovered these hidden lessons from the Love family, you can dive even deeper. I've put together an exclusive ebook that breaks down strategies like these and shows you exactly how to apply them to your own journey. The link is right there in the comments. Don't just listen to the story, learn how to write your own. The birth of Spam in 1937, after years of failure, sweat, and doubt, George Hormel finally unveiled what would become his legacy. Spam. You won't believe this. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't fancy, but it was revolutionary. A simple can of pork with extended shelf life, designed not for prestige but for survival. While other companies marketed fine cuts of meat for the wealthy, George aimed for the working families who needed affordable protein, and in doing so, he broke the rules of an entire industry. The truth revealed is that Spam didn't launch to applause. In fact, it was mocked. People scoffed, calling it cheap, strange, even unnecessary. It almost didn't work because the early reception was cold. But here's the hidden lesson. Sometimes the greatest innovations aren't instantly recognized. They're ridiculed before they're celebrated. What no one tells you is that rejection can actually be proof you're onto something new. George learned this firsthand, yet Spam had something its critics overlooked: resilience. While luxury brands struggled to survive the Great Depression, Spam thrived as survival food. Affordable, filling, and lasting longer than fresh cuts, it offered working families dignity in the darkest times. The shocking story? What really happened was that Spam wasn't a joke, it was a lifeline. And slowly, the very can people laughed at began to sit proudly on kitchen shelves across America. George's gamble was working. The product spread quietly, family by family, town by town. It didn't explode overnight, but like a steady fire, it refused to die. The hidden lesson here is powerful. Success doesn't always come in one big moment. Sometimes it's persistence, consistency, and patience that change everything. George's little can of pork was becoming more than food. It was becoming hope in a can. And here's where things get interesting. The world was about to change in ways George could never predict. His invention, designed for survival in tough economic times, was about to meet the greatest test of all, a world at war. What no one saw coming was that Spam, once ridiculed, would soon travel farther than George ever imagined, feeding millions beyond America's borders. The cliffhanger. This poor boy's invention, once dismissed as scraps in a can, was about to become a soldier's best friend, a nation's resource, and eventually a cultural icon across the globe. What really happened next would shock even George himself, because Spam was heading toward World War II and global expansion. When World War II erupted, George Hormel's invention suddenly found a new purpose. You won't believe this. Spam, once mocked as cheap meat, became a lifeline for millions of soldiers. Its long shelf life, portability, and affordability made it perfect for military rations. The truth revealed is that Spam wasn't just food anymore, it was strategy. Armies marched with it, fleets sailed with it, and pilots flew with it. This little can was now fueling a global fight. Soldiers across Europe and the Pacific ate it daily. Sometimes fried, sometimes straight from the can, Spam became as familiar to them as their rifles. It almost didn't work because the monotony of eating it every day drew complaints. But here's the hidden lesson. Even when mocked, consistency wins. The shocking story? What really happened was that Spam became ingrained in memory, a strange mix of love and hate, but always survival. After the war, something unexpected happened. Soldiers returned home and carried their familiarity with Spam back into civilian life, but even more surprising, Spam had spread across borders. No one saw it coming, but countries devastated by war, Korea, Japan, the Philippines, embraced it. Why? Because it was accessible, filling, and a reminder of resilience. What began as food waste in America had transformed into cultural heritage overseas. In Korea, Spam became part of budae, an army stew that symbolized survival and adaptation. In Japan, it found its way into rice dishes. In the Philippines, it became comfort food, integrated into breakfasts and celebrations. The truth revealed is that Spam wasn't just an American product anymore, it was global. What no one tells you is that sometimes, your idea has to leave home to truly find its place. George could never have predicted this. His scrapstone product had crossed oceans, reshaped diets, and embedded itself into cultures far from Buffalo. The irony? While critics in the US still laughed at Spam, it was being honored elsewhere as a symbol of strength and resilience. It almost didn't work, but Spam's ability to adapt across borders made it unstoppable. And here's the cliffhanger: while Spam was conquering the world, back home the criticism never stopped. Mocked as mystery meat, ridiculed as cheap, and dismissed as low-class, it seemed destined to fade. What really happened next, however, would shock even its loudest critics. Because Spam wasn't just surviving, it was about to outlast countless luxury brands. Criticism and survival back home, Spam never fully escaped its reputation. You won't believe this. While it was saving lives overseas, in America people mocked it as cheap and mystery meat. Comedians made jokes, critics dismissed it, and gourmet chefs turned up their noses. The truth revealed is that success doesn't always look glamorous. Sometimes it looks like a can of meat that refuses to disappear. Yet Spam did something countless luxury brands couldn't: it survived. While flashy products rose and fell, Spam remained on shelves year after year. It almost didn't work because the ridicule was constant, and many thought its time was over. But here's the shocking story: survival itself became its strength. In the face of mockery, Spam's consistency built loyalty in silence. The hidden lesson here is powerful. Don't chase prestige, chase resilience. What no one tells you is that prestige fades, but utility endures. Think about it. How many brands you once admired have vanished? Well, the ones you laughed at are still here. Spam endured not because it was loved by all, but because it was needed by many. And that need changed everything. Even during economic downturns, families kept buying it. Why? Because when wallets were thin, Spam stretched meals further than fresh cuts of meat ever could. Learn from this mistake that so many entrepreneurs make, focusing only on the fancy audience while ignoring the masses. George's creation wasn't glamorous, but it was accessible, and accessibility wins when times get tough. The ridicule actually fueled its legend. Each insult only highlighted the fact that, despite the jokes, Spam was still here. The shocking truth: mockery can sometimes act as free publicity. Critics spread the name far and wide, ensuring everyone knew what Spam was, whether they loved it or hated it. What really happened was that ridicule cemented its place in culture. And here's the cliffhanger: while people rolled their eyes at Spam, George Hormel's little invention was quietly building something much bigger. No one saw it coming, but this so-called cheap meat was on its way to becoming a billion-dollar empire. The question was no longer if Spam could survive, but just how far it could go. The billion-dollar legacy today: Spam isn't just a product, it's a phenomenon. You won't believe this, but over 9 billion cans have been sold worldwide, reaching more than 40 countries. From breakfast tables in the Philippines to army stews in Korea, its presence is undeniable. The truth revealed is that what began as factory scraps now stands as one of the most recognized food icons in history. George Hormel's vision turned a dropout boy from Buffalo into a global name. Think about it: a child who once scrubbed blood off factory floors built something that outlasted luxury brands. economic downturns, and even wars. No one saw it coming, but the little can mocked as mystery meat became a cultural symbol of endurance. That irony, it's the secret behind its staying power. Spam is proof that reinvention comes from rejection. It almost didn't work, and yet its very survival made it unstoppable. What no one tells you is that sometimes the ideas people laugh at today are the ones they depend on tomorrow. The shocking story is that George didn't just build a product, he built a legacy that billions of people unknowingly share every time they open a can. And here's the hidden lesson for anyone chasing success. Don't ignore the scraps, the overlooked, or the mocked. That's often where the gold lies. Learn from this mistake that so many make, believing you need prestige or perfection to succeed. George Hormel proved the opposite. You only need vision, resilience, and the courage to keep going when everyone doubts you. What really happened wasn't just the rise of a canned meat brand. It was the rise of a mindset, turning invisibility into opportunity, turning scraps into survival, turning ridicule into reinvention. George Hormel's empire wasn't built in a boardroom, but on factory floors where no one believed he mattered. And yet, he changed everything. And here's the cliffhanger. His story doesn't just belong to him. It belongs to anyone who has ever been overlooked, mocked, or underestimated. Because if a poor boy from Buffalo could build a billion-dollar empire from factory scraps, what's stopping you from rewriting your own story? So now you know the shocking story, how a poor boy from Buffalo turned factory scraps into a billion-dollar empire. But here's the truth revealed. His journey isn't just history, it's a mirror. What about you? How many times have you thrown away an idea, a skill, or even a failure, not realizing it could be the very thing that changes everything? No one tells you this, but success isn't about perfection. It almost didn't work for George Hormel, yet he kept going when everyone doubted him. The hidden lesson here: resilience beats prestige every single time. So ask yourself, are you chasing approval or are you building something that lasts? Think about it. If rejection became reinvention for a poor factory boy, what's stopping you from turning your own setbacks into a future empire? What really happened with Spam proves one thing: your circumstances don't define you, your choices do. And here's my challenge to you: don't just watch this story, apply it. What's the scrap in your life that you've been ignoring? What overlooked opportunity could you turn into your breakthrough? The shocking truth is, if you don't act, nothing changes. But if you do, it could change everything. And before you go, if you really want to take action on what you've learned today, I've left a special ebook in the comments. Inside, you'll find the hidden lessons, the mistakes to avoid, and the exact strategies that billion-dollar empires are built on. Don't just be inspired. Click the link, grab your copy, and start building your own success story. If you found value in this story, subscribe to Legends of Business and hit the notification bell, because the next episode might hold the very lesson you need to transform your own life. Drop a comment below sharing what hidden lesson you're taking away from George Hormel's story. And remember, legends aren't born, they're made.